Hello and welcome back to the FSF podcast. I am Tim. I am your host. And tonight you are listening and or watching, depending on where you're getting this, to a show that's made by a nerd for you nerds. So I'm glad that you could be here with me tonight. Now, our guest in the nerdatorium tonight is an actress. She's an author, a TED Talk speaker. She has a documentary film out there that's pretty powerful. And she's an advocate for those who are working through addiction. There's a lot here to cover tonight. Now, you've seen her work in over nearly 90 episodes of Babylon 5, but you've also seen her in shows like 911, Blood of Zeus, and there's a whole litany of other shows. She's got a really cool resume out there. You've also heard her in video games like Starfield, World of Warcraft, Fallout 76, Halo 4. I'm barely scratching the surface of the voice work that she's done. And now just this past November, she released another children's book entitled The Mother Tree. And there's a whole litany of other books. She's, like I said, she's not just an author of one book. She is an author of many. So I'm very excited to discuss with her tonight how she began on in the entertainment business, some of her on-screen roles, her written work as an author, her advocacy work, and so much more. I am very proud and equally as excited to welcome Claudia Christian to the FSF podcast. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Tim. Great to be here.
I am so excited. I wanted to get you on the show for a little while, so having an opportunity to sit down and talk with you, I'm very giddy, and I've worked through most of my fan base.
I am in the nerdatorium. Claudia is in the nerdatorium.
Absolutely. All right. So Claudia, just jump right into it. The very first question I ask every single guest, unless they've been here, multiple times, is about their origin story, because I love to know why people do the things they do, what makes you tick, why you got involved in the entertainment industry. Plus, as I mentioned, I'm a nerd, and we nerds really enjoy a good origin story for our heroes. So being the hero of our story tonight, what made you say, I want to be an entertainer who does all these different things?
Wow. Well, I'll unpack that quickly. I always, as long as I can remember, I was writing. I wrote little stories, and I had a whole series of stories about the underdwellers, which were these little creatures under the earth. Henry the mouse. I had a whole, series of books about him. I was always writing and reading books. I loved it. And our television was very restricted when I was a kid. My father, God bless him, he was like, no sugar, no TV. And, the only two things a child wants, of course.
Well, yeah.
So it became this kind of mystical, Wizard of Ozzy kind of thing that you could have just tiny bits of. So in my allocated 1 hour of television a week, I chose Little House on the Prairie as my show.
Oh, wow.
So now I have my 1 hour, and we were allowed to watch 60 Minutes. Well, in that 1 hour, I saw kids come on, Melissa Gilbert kind of looked like me as a kid with the pigtails and the, brown hair and the freckles. And I thought, if she can do it, that's what my attitude was already. I'd already done plays. I had already been on stage, and I loved it. I loved everything about performing. It took me out of my shyness as a kid. It also helped me because I had tinnitus, I had OCD. I was a mess as a child, and I was
Fair.
Very, very quiet, and stage just made me forget everything. So my dream, the second I saw that kid on Little House on the Prairie, there's actual children, there were lots of kids on that show. I thought, I am going to be on television. So it's interesting because so many actors come on, and I'm not saying it's pretentious, but it can veer into pretentiousness. I watched Akira Kurosawa movies when I was a kid, Cassavetes and Swedish, dramas that were 4 hours long. And I'm like, no, man, I had I Love Lucy, Gilligan's Island, Courtship of Eddie's Father. I had I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched. I had television. That was my little, and the after school specials and the Disney, specials. So,
yep.
It was that was the little illicit, not allowed drug in the house. So I made it very clear in my head from a very young age that I was going to be in television. And that dictated everything from that step forward. I did high school in 2.5 years. When my dad got transferred to California from Connecticut when I was 14, I said, okay, it's a sign, because I need to be in California. So that's where the television industry is. I mean, every single thing was, I thought, falling into place because I was supposed to do that. And I moved to LA when I was 16 years old, alone.
Oh, wow.
And I left the family home. I had a car, and I had saved up enough money from working 5 different jobs to get an apartment. And that's how I started. That is my origin
wow.
story. I was one determined little kid.
I would say so. I think it's also possible that your mom or my mom and your dad may have been related, because my mom told me that, rather, my mother told me, I keep thinking I'm getting this switched up in my head, but my mother always told me that I couldn't have too much candy because that would rot my teeth, and I couldn't watch too much TV because that was going to rot my brain.
Yes. Little did they know that television was stimulating my power of creating a life. It just seemed like something wonderful to do, to tell stories to people, to make even adults stop thinking about their job and their problems and the bills and all that, and just be suspended in this moment where we're all communicating through this strange device, which is a television. To me, it was magical. And so was the stage, and it still is. I mean, I've done my share of films. I've done 50 films, but
yeah.
And I certainly wouldn't have turned down a major film career, but I kept falling back into television. It's interesting.
I think nowadays, and maybe you have a different viewpoint on this, and I'm actually kind of hoping maybe you do, and if you do, because I love to hear different perspectives on thoughts. But it always seemed to me that as a young person that there was a clear divide between people who would work in television and those who would work in film. And it seems that nowadays that line is more blurred than ever, where we have
Totally.
TV stars going into film and film stars going
yeah.
into TV. Whereas before it was like, oh, you're going to be a TV star, you're only going to do TV.
Yes,
Am I mistaken in that?
Not at all, but I was sort of I got my first TV series in 1983, and that was when Elizabeth Taylor had already done a soap opera, and Charlton Heston was doing TV. The stars were dabbling in television, so it wasn't as much as it was in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The 80s started the feeling of, you know what, Joan Collins did a lot of films. She's doing TV now. Linda Evans. There were stars. There were significant movie stars doing television in the 80s, but it certainly wasn't. It certainly wasn't as sort of interchangeable as it is now. I mean, you look at Nicole Kidman and all the A-listers, they're going from TV to film, but TV to film. So it has definitely become much more of a blur now, but I was at the precipice of that blur.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I mean, I looked at some of your IMDb credits, and some of the earlier shows that you were on. Like, one of my favorites actually as a kid, one of the shows that my mom would let me watch with her was TJ Hooker.
No,
and,
yeah.
Yeah. Of course, Shatner was in that.
Yeah, Shatner. That was like my second job. But speaking of TV, I mean, I did a Columbo movie of the week with Faye Dunaway. That's television, and Faye Dunaway played my mother. So
yeah, and she was huge during that era.
She was huge. That's Chinatown. I mean, these biggest films around, Oscars, this, that. So yeah,
right,
that was definitely, that was by the 90s, early 90s. That was definitely blurred. But that early television stuff like T.J. Hooker and what are those other really cheesy series I did, A-Team and all that stuff. Those were funny. It was a
campy
gig,
fun.
and it campy, completely campy. And when I look at those things now, I think how innocent they are.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there was comparison with the full frontal nudity and gang banging and things going on, and people dying of drug overdoses every 5 seconds.
Absolutely.
47s. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, yeah, actually, it's a really cool origin story for you, though, because I was not aware that you had moved out when you were 16 to Los Angeles. And that's a big undertaking for a young person. So, I mean, at 16 as a minor, did you go out there and live? I know you said you had to work to get your own apartment and things, but when you first moved out there, did you land with somebody that you knew out there, or did you just like, no, I'm going and I'm going to do this?
I didn't know anybody. I mean, I luckily, I shouldn't say that. I was working one of my plethora of jobs to make enough money. So I started working at about 12. And then I was modeling at 13 and 14. And then I got a job in a cafe and a job at a sports store selling Hobie cats and bikinis and things like that. So I had a lot of jobs. Plus, I worked in the office of the school because my guidance counselor was trying to get me enough credits to get a GED really quickly in a short span of time. So she gave me what's called workers' credits. I came up to her. God bless her, this woman, Jan Fritzen. I said, look, I'm a 40-year-old trapped in a 15-year-old's body, so we got to get me out of here. And she was like, you know what? I believe you. and she was so wonderful. But so I worked towards that. And in my little modeling days as a teenager in Laguna Beach, I met this makeup artist who was a little bit older than me. I think he was about 20. So he had, a little more experience than me. And I moved into an apartment. We shared the rent of a small apartment. And my parents were happier that I was with an older gay man, living in older, he's 20 years old, living in, and little did they know what he was getting up to. But anyway, it sounded safe to be with a 20-year-old gay roommate. It sounded safe, but it was anything but safe. The people that were coming in that apartment, it was crazy. But, I was just very professional, and I think they trusted that I knew what I was doing. I had a legal name change when I was 14 in preparation to act. Because nobody could pronounce my last name, which was Coughlin, Coghlan. I was born Coughlin, and everyone said, "Oh, Coughlin."
Oh, yeah.
Coughlin. So eventually, I was like, "Okay, I'll just use my mom's name, Christian," which was also probably a mistake because the very first interview I had with an agent, was this Jewish fellow, and he said, "You're going to call yourself Claudia Christian? You never work in this town, kid." That's so great. I was like, wait a minute, what about Linda Christian? She was a big star. I was like trying to justify my real last name, I pulled out my Irish birth name to him. I said, well, what about my dad's name? He goes, no one knows how to pronounce that thing. I was like, so
That's
what
funny.
am I dealing with? Mom's name or dad's name? So, and I had started a bank account, and I had a checking account and everything, and I had a car. So I was perfectly able to live in LA, but I wasn't able to work yet because I was my full height and I looked more mature, and nobody would hire a 16-year-old to play 18. They were hiring 18-year-olds to play 14 and 15 and 16. So because you'd have to get a teacher on set and all that. So it took me 2 years to get a job. But in that time, it was a remarkable experience. I worked, obviously, to make a living. I went to acting classes. I got my headshots done. I signed with a manager for 3 years, and I met people. And I also did what's called go-sees, which back in those days, they would send out young actors to meet all the casting directors.
Go-sees. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, go-sees. So by the time you actually turned 18, by the time I turned 18, all my manager had to do was make a few calls and say, hey, Claudia's 18 now. If you have anything small for her. And lo and behold, Irene Mariano at Lorimar NBC had a little gig on Dallas, 5 lines and under, and I went in and got the job.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you also mentioned, though, that you've always had writing in your blood, and you were always writing stories. Now, in the introduction, we talked about your latest children's novel, The Mother Tree. So I was hoping that you would tell our listeners about that book, what they can expect, and what's going on with the book so that they can look forward to it.
Sure. So The Mother Tree started when I was in Rome with my very first bout of COVID with my partner, who's a wonderful composer. And we both had COVID, and we weren't terribly ill, luckily, but we obviously were isolated in the hotel room in Rome. And at one point, I think I must have been running a fever because I sort of hallucinated this idea of these animal characters living all in a tree together. And I started riffing on the French cat, Lulu, it was abandoned by the humans. And then I had this raccoon, because I used to have a pet raccoon when I was a kid. And I thought, well, Rocky's the forager, and Rocky's sort of the end of days kind of scavenger guy. And then I came up with this character that was that was reminiscent of Julie Andrews and Mary Poppins. It was the cardinal, the bird, Madeline,
okay.
and she could see everything from above. And then my last character was this turtle, Walter. Walter was very old, and I started doing these voices for my partner, especially the really cynical French cat. Very American people. She was very cynical, very negative, very pessimistic. And he started to think of a musical piece. He said, "Let's do a piece like Peter and the Wolf about the climate," because my idea was about climate change and about how these animals are trying to survive, and how Lulu is abandoned and she finds these other creatures, and they let her into their tree, which they're living in this oak tree, but the oak tree is dying. And so I started thinking about this, and then he said, let's do a live orchestral piece, and you be the narrator and you play the characters and write the little story. And so I did that. And suddenly, in trying to present it to other orchestras and ensemble groups, we realized we kind of need source material. So I might as well write the book. And I was talking to Chris Macaulay, my writing partner, and I said, Chris, I really want to write this into a book. And he said, oh yeah, that sounds great. And lo and behold, like 2 seconds later, he had a full on, book. We noodled around a bit. I sent him the story that I wrote for the orchestral piece. I sent him all the character descriptions and this and that. I did the voices for him, and boom, it was so fast. So we came up with that, and that book came out in November, just this past November, and it's called The Mother Tree, and it's Crystal Lake Publishing. It's a sweet book. It's a very sweet book too. It doesn't shove climate change down your throat. But it does include, fires and floods, and it teaches kids, what they can do. And there's a nice resolve at the end when humans come in and help the animals.
I like that. I like one of the things I think I would appreciate most about that, and not only because I have a 2-year-old grandson and it sounds like a fun book to read to him. But also the thing that I like about that is it kind of takes me back to some of the books that I read as a child, some of my mother would let me watch animated series, some of the Saturday morning cartoons, and the G.I. Joe, the more you know, and, knowing is half the battle, and all that kind of stuff. Even all that stuff was never something that was like openly just like plunger shoved down your throat. It was, hey, here's some tidbits that got you thinking about different things and kind of pointed you in the right direction. And I kind of feel like, based on what you're saying, that's kind of not exactly the same vein, but it certainly helps, I think, to help mold those young minds to start thinking about things that they can do positively for themselves, for the people around them, their environment, things like that.
And bring awareness to the issue and to other creatures, especially in this era of a lot of me. Let's start thinking about other people and other things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a little kindness can go a long way, and I think we're seeing that more and more in this world, and especially we're in like 2020 part 5 right now, or actually into part 6, but just like the world has kind of stopped since 2020, and it's not the same world it was before COVID. This post-COVID world is a little crazy, and I think that anytime you can do something like what you're talking about right there, where you're raising awareness and you're helping people to get, kind of pointed in the right direction, because I think that's always a very big thing and a very good thing. So that's excellent. Now, I know this isn't your only work. You said also that you've got a cookbook. I know you've written an autobiography, and there's a couple other books there and some things. So how many books in total do you have published right now?
Oh gosh, that's a darn good question. I have Babylon
Hip shots are fine.
Babylon Confidential, Journeys, Wolf's Odyssey, the original, Snack Hacks, Mother Tree. And I think about 8, probably. I think around 8. I think probably the one that might appeal to people on this show would be the cookbook that I made for my gaming fans, because whenever I would talk to people who were gamers and being, the badass in World of Warcraft, I would meet a lot of fans. And
Sure.
a lot of times they would say that they just didn't have time to cook, or they didn't know how to cook, or they were never taught how to cook. And so I wrote a cookbook that there was no excuses. These are fast, healthy, inexpensive meals to make. And so,
awesome.
yeah, and I did it with a wonderful gamer, Mark Michel, who became my friend, and he has cerebral palsy, and so he's, he has limitations in his physical
Okay.
ability, and a lot of the recipes that he formulated and added to the book are really good for disabled people as well. So,
awesome.
So they're easy to make, and there's some hacks in there. And it's interesting because I did hacks for making fish so you don't overcook it, and he did some hacks for popcorn and this and nuts and all these snacks and things. And then that actually encouraged him to write another book for hacks for people who have physical limitations. So he's about to publish that book. So I'm really happy that it started. Yeah, it started kind of this lovely way of catering to the needs of people who maybe can't reach that upper shelf or pick up the cans or open jars or,
Right, yeah.
So yeah, because I mean, everybody deserves the chance to have decent recipes that they can make.
Oh, for sure.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So that was a really lovely book that I was doing cooking classes with Pat Tallman. Patricia Tallman was in Babylon 5 with me. She played Lita Alexander, and she's one of my dearest best friends. And during the pandemic, we started doing these cooking shows, Cooking with Claudia. So, those are still available as well. But that led to Snack Hacks, the cookbook, and these Facebook groups, and we were just all trying to figure out what to do with 50 pounds of rice, and I had 5 recipes, pandemic rice recipes. That's like all the people who fearfully bought rice and macaroni and things like that. I was like, okay, I got a recipe for sweet potatoes. Yeah, you're the one that bought the 500-pound bag of rice. I knew it. Are those Funko Pops in back of you, by the way?
Yes, they are.
Those are Funko Pops. So do you have my Xalatath one?
I do not yet.
Oh.
I've got to get it. I can't. Every time I have found any of the Babylon 5 Funkos, they have been so ridiculously priced. I found them at shows, cons, and things like that, where people have taken the price and just inflated it, where I could not justify purchasing them.
No, the Xalatath is the World of Warcraft one. It just came out. It's so cute. It's purple. I have 3 Funk.
Okay.
I have 3 Funk Pops. I have Babylon 5. I have Disney's Atlantis. Helga Sinclair has a Funko Pop. And Xalatath from World of Warcraft just came out with one. It's really cute.
I will have to look for that.
Yeah. Well, you should have one of my Funko Pops, don't you think, Tim?
I am working on it. I promise.
Put the poor guy under the gun.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Because you can't quite see it, but it goes for a little bit that way, and there's a whole nother shelf over here. You'd think with like 300 something pops I'd have one of yours, but not yet. But I'm
not yet. That's okay. I'll forgive you.
I appreciate the kindness. All right, so let's take the spotlight off of me and my inability to find the correct Funko Pop. Yeah. And let's put it back on you for a moment.
All right.
So as a writer, and I actually hadn't planned to ask you this question. This just popped in my head. Anyway, but so you've done a lot of different things over your career, clearly, as actor, voice actor, author, advocate, all these different things. How do you find that writing scratches an itch for you that acting and voice acting does not?
Well, I think most artists have a favorite medium.
True.
I mean, some might love composing as much as they love painting. But for me, I would, I really enjoy acting. Writing was something that, I do to express myself when I can't act. when the jobs aren't coming around to perform, then I would take a writing gig or come up with a story or satisfy my creative spark with, like this past year, I wrote a series, a half-hour comedy, just out of the sheer need to be creative.
Okay.
So I would say that it doesn't really scratch a particular itch other than self-expression. And of course, my biographies or autobiographical works were specifically to help people face their own problems, particularly with alcohol use disorder, because I struggled with drinking. I found a wonderful method that worked for me, and I sort of came out of the closet in 2010 and started helping people. And I think the easiest way for me to help them was to write a book. That first book was specifically to show people that this person who played a hero on TV struggled, and it's normal to struggle. It's a normal thing that happens. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about. And the most important thing is to find something that works for you. I don't care how anybody recovers. I just want them to recover. So but for me, the reason why I advocate the Sinclair method is because I used it. It worked for me. I coach people who use it. It works for them. That's why I've stuck to medication assisted treatment in my advocacy, because I've seen how unbelievably successful they work for alcohol use disorder and substance use disorders. So that's kind of my niche is helping people find the right medication to stop drinking or to cut down or to stop using.
That's wonderful. Now, you sent me a link for the website for Option Saves Lives.
Yeah.
And this is obviously very personal to you, and you discussed in your TED Talk. It's the topic of your recent documentary that you also shared with me. But with your own struggles with addiction, how has that directed your life choices since, and moving forward? Since the day that you said, this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to stop it?
Well, I mean, in 2009, when I found this method for getting rid of cravings, which is the Sinclair method, it's targeted use of a FDA-approved medication called naltrexone. And when I started doing the method, my life changed for the better. So instead of keeping it to myself and just fixing my problem and then going back to work, I decided, wow, no, the whole world needs to know about this because a lot of people are dying needlessly. Yeah. Here's this cheap FDA-approved generic medication that's, $1 a tablet, and nobody's utilizing it in the right way. So I went on this mission to change the way people were treated with alcohol use disorder. I went on this mission to start a nonprofit, which originally was called C3 Foundation, and we recently rebranded because we're not a foundation. We actually rely on donations. And that was just the naive me when I opened my 501c3 nonprofit. I named it with this stupid word on the end, foundation, and people got confused thinking, oh, here's some rich actress. And I'm like, no, we have no money. We need money. We're not funded. We rely on your $10 a month donations really, really make us survive. So I did that. I launched my nonprofit, and then I made this beautiful documentary that's less than an hour long. I made it specifically for the loved ones of people who are struggling with alcohol. It's called One Little Pill, and I made it because I wanted a mom and dad or a spouse or a brother or sister or a friend to be able to look at this documentary and go, okay, I understand the method. Now I'm going to tell my loved one who's suffering about the method. So it's really, really palatable. You can watch it, like I said, less than an hour long, and you can understand what TSM does, how it works, and you can see real people on it. And that documentary has been seen by a lot of people, but really the most effective tool that I've been lucky enough to do is the TEDx talk. Over 5 million people have seen that, and it really has opened up the world to people understanding that this method is real. It's not some snake oil thing. It really does work. So. Yeah. So if your question was, how has it changed my view, is I would not, I suffered a lot for over a decade. And I probably, missed out on a lot of opportunities because I had gained weight from the booze and I didn't look my best and I certainly wasn't feeling my best. But when I look at it now and I look back at what I went through and where I am today and how many people my advocacy has helped, I wouldn't change anything. I think that in a way, I don't mean to sound holier than whatever, but I think I was chosen. I think I was chosen to go through that so that because I have the tools. I'm a good speaker. I had a little fan base, and that fan base, let me tell you, that sci-fi specific fan base, they were the ones that financed my movie, One Little Pill. I raised $60,000, and I know that 99% of those were sci-fi fans. And so they paid for that film. They spread the word when I did my TEDx talk in London. They showed up at conventions and put dollar bills when I was trying to raise money to, start a coaching program. They're the ones that bought my book. They're the ones that told their friends that were drinking too much, hey, Claudia did this. So I really believe that combination, that special sauce of an actress who wants to help people and has a sci-fi fan base. It was like God said, give her alcoholism, because I couldn't have done it if I didn't have that fan base, and I couldn't have done it in the way that I did it if I wasn't comfortable speaking or I wasn't an actor. It really was a perfect mix. I mean, it wasn't fun to go through what I went through at all, believe me, on any level. But I am grateful that I can look back today and say, wow, there's a lot of people who are alive and happy and healthy because of what happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say this, from what I was able to watch of your documentary and what I was able to watch of your TEDx and just looking around your website and doing some other things. I think one of the greatest things that I've seen, and I'll just throw this out there, alcoholism gallops through my family. And I have always been exceptionally cautious of how much I drink and all those things, because I'm always been afraid of the what if. Yeah. But one of the things I think is most inviting about the way that you present things is that you humanize it. And you make it so where it's like, hey, we're all human. We all have our imperfections. We all have our issues. I never once in anything that I read or saw did I feel that you were preaching. And because in all honesty, sometimes the people that you see that are giving these TED Talks and they get a little preachy, a little Sunday morning pulpity, about what they're doing and why I'm
or they're
so
selling.
awesome and
or they're selling something. And that's a lot of people accused me of being in bed with a pharma company. I'm like, honey, I wish. Problem is, it's generic, babe.
Right?
I'm not making any dough off of this. Trust me.
I wish I was getting some of that pharma cash, but no.
Yeah, believe me. So, but well, I think you have to humanize anything that somebody is struggling with, whether it's mental health issues or substance use disorders, eating disorders. I mean, there's nothing wrong with these people. They're not morally bereft. So, and I'm not any better than the guy laying in a gutter with a paper bag in his hand. I'm no better than that man. I just found something that worked for me.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that I say is that I wish everybody had access to this information so that they could find the help that they needed. And that was just the impetus behind everything I did, was let's just spread the word by being loving to each other. If you go to a party or you have an uncle who's drinking too much, just tell him, hey, I saw this actress and she was talking about this thing. That's how we help other people.
100%.
Or doing podcasts like this.
Yeah. I used to host another podcast. It was my very first one. It was called Focused on Forward. And the reason for that was in 2019, my daughter was diagnosed with a chronic illness. We spent 97 days in the hospital with her. And coming out, this was just a wet bag of cats up there. And there was a lot that I needed to unpack. And I was trying to figure all that out. And I was flailing horribly. Not failing, flailing, just grasping at anything I could. And I was, and then there was some failing too. Don't get me wrong. But I started that podcast because I was talking to other people who had gone through other things in their life. And one of the things that I appreciated most was the people who I had talked to who had overcome addiction and had fought through these things and were working through all these different things in their life. There's always a moment where they chose, and that was where the tagline came from, because that was a saying that my wife and I use. Well, all we can do is focus on forward. So, where they actually chose to make that step forward in their life. And it's very invigorating to see people doing that and hearing what they're doing and why they're doing it. And so for me, I was like, boy, I wish I would have known this about Claudia way back when, because I would have been loved to have her had her on Focused on Forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I always think that it's very important to humanize these conversations, and having a face that can go to the conversation, such as yours, helps people to make it something where it's relatable, where it's not just this stigma that's a monkey on their back. And it may very well be for a little bit, but knowing that somebody else that they have watched and appreciated and, and all these other things may help them to be able to point themselves to become focused on forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think I look at what Halle Berry's doing with menopause, what Gina Davis did with inequality, sexual inequality in film, choosing these topics that, you have a voice, you have a platform, and now you're going to talk about something that you struggled with, or that bothers you, or that you think is unfair. And I think that's amazing. I think that performers who have a fan base and an audience, I think honestly, I think it's their duty to do something good for the world. Use your voice in some positive way, whatever it is. Just even if it's small, just do something with that power, with that. I always say, I wish I wrote to so many A-listers. I wrote to Ben Affleck's agent, Brad Pitt's agent, anybody who identified as an alcoholic, anybody.
Sure.
I was like, I wrote to everybody's managers, their press agents, saying, please have them try this pill, just hoping that one of them would be on the cover of People magazine saying, I found this pill. And I would be like, yay, then everybody in the world would know about it. But, instead you got little me struggling, climbing up the mountain, going, shouting. But, hey. Well,
you're doing a good work, and I applaud your efforts. And I hope, even if you only help one person, you've done a tremendous thing. So I applaud that wholeheartedly. All right. Well, speaking of that science fiction fan base, now looking at IMDb and your span of your career, which has some really cool stuff on your resume. And exactly. Yeah.
I knew you were going to hidden, right?
But but you had all these guest appearances on a lot of widely appreciated shows. We mentioned some of them earlier, like the A-Team and Dallas.
He's back to television. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. I know. I'm bouncing back and forth here.
Well, you said sci-fi, and this is such a sci-fi. It's fun. I was doing a little video for a convention in Boston for my writing partner, and he wanted me to talk about The Hidden, which is why I happened to have that photograph right there. And you said sci-fi. I'm like, well, that's a sci-fi movie.
It is. No, that was a good call. But you had all these widely appreciated shows until you landed your reoccurring role in Babylon 5. Now, what
reoccurring? No. Regular. Recurring is when you're only in occasionally.
I sit corrected. But yeah, you had your regular role in Babylon 5, almost, I think it was like 87, 90 episodes, somewhere in there. But what has being part of such a beloved franchise meant to you both personally and professionally?
Well, you've just heard my spiel on what it did for my advocacy,
right?
Having that fan base, and certainly opened up, I think, a completely different part of the world. I don't think I ever would have met the people I've met or traveled to the places I traveled had it not been for that show. On a completely, side street, I certainly would have known the convention world or cosplay or anything. I had no idea about sci-fi or genre. I wouldn't have I wouldn't be friends with Nicola Bryant and all my Babylon 5 co-stars and all the people I've met at conventions. And, I mean, it's just created a whole different world. I don't think there's anything comparable to it. I don't even think soap opera stars have that. I mean, I know they do their soap opera conventions and things, but I don't think there's the breadth of that anywhere else other than the genre of sci-fi. And I also don't think there's the extensive loyalty. There are people who, you did one episode of the original Star Trek and like, you can still sign autographs. So I think that it's a very unique atmosphere to be a part of. And it was a beautifully written character. And it gave me some of the deepest, most beautiful friendships of my life. So,
it's funny you say that you do one episode of Star Trek and you can sign autographs. Immediately I thought of this past November here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. There's the Grand Rapids Comic-Con. Great show, very well supported, and yeah, they had I have his name written down, but the gentleman who was the Gorn from the Gorn episode in Star Trek was there. And he had just this massive line stretching out down the hallway because people wanted to talk to the Gorn so badly.
Isn't that funny? Yeah.
Well, yeah, it just amused me. But you saying that reminded me of that. But
yeah, well, it's true. I mean, they're people who wore prosthetics in one episode, and you couldn't even see their face, but they have their loyal fan base. And I used to be buddies with Jeremy Bulloch and Dave Krause and all the guys that were the men behind the masks. And they all had these mostly non-speaking roles in Star Wars. And
yeah,
they would travel around together and make a nice, tidy living doing that. And I thought it was wonderful. It was wonderful. They were fun. They were entertaining. They were kind to the fans. So I love the fact that you can, keep doing that for 50, 60 years. Why not? Why not?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So it's a whole different world. Yeah.
Oh yeah. The con world is, I haven't been on that side of the table. Obviously I've been on the walk up. Hi, I'm Tim. I really like what you did. Could you sign this, please? I've been on that side of the world. But even on that side of the world, it's impressive to me to watch people come up to somebody who's been on a show or even that one episode and see the fans' reaction. And I love the stories that come out of some of these interactions. And I've seen people give gifts to. Have you ever received a gift from somebody in line at a Comic-Con that said, I made this because of you or your character at this show, that thing?
That's actually how I met my convention agent in the early 1990s. I did my first Babylon 5 convention, and this woman came up to me and gave me a stained glass window of Babylon 5, and she said that her partner had made it for me because her partner was a big B5 fan. And we just started talking and exchanged addresses like you did in the 90s. If you ever come to LA, here. And
right?
I just thought she was a really nice person. And lo and behold, I sent her a thank you note for the stained glass window, and we started chatting. And I said, "Why don't you become a convention agent? There's all of us need one." Right. And there's only maybe one agent. I think at the time there were one or two agents around, and she moved from Georgia and became my agent, all because she gave me a gift in line. Now, cool I've received a lot of really stupid gifts and weird gifts and creepy gifts and homemade food gifts and things. But in my drinking days, everybody used to give me mead. And then when I stopped drinking, everybody knew that I was a chocoholic. So they would give me chocolates. And but I in many of my books and many interviews over the years, I've told the story about being shot by a guy in a triple suit. And that all began because he gave me some handmade knitted pillowcases. So yes, I have been given some gifts in my lifetime. Some that have led to more interesting stories than others.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. All right, Claudia, we have reached a point in this conversation. As much as I would love to talk for you for hours and hours, I know that you have other things to attend to. But it's time for me to ask you our silly question.
Okay, the silly question.
The silly question. It's really not all that silly, but the backstory to the silly question, I have to tell you that it's like building a clock to tell you the time. It's not that long. So one of our team members on FSF Podcast, her name is Kathleen. Her and her daughter were out and about town doing some things, and somebody asked her daughter this question, but not her. And Kathleen was like, well, wait a minute. I should be asked this question too. You should never age out of this question. And that question is, Claudia Christian, what's your favorite dinosaur?
That's so unfair. That's so unfair, because I would never know the name of it. But I was watching, the wonderful. They have a series now on Netflix. It is the beginning of. I don't even know if it's David Attenborough or Morgan Freeman, but whoever's narrating it, one of these giant, long, epic, beginning of the world kind of things. And they had almost an entire episode on the various dinosaur birds that was just amazing. The very, not the giant flyers, but all the tiny miniature flying dinosaurs. And I would never know pterodactyl, Trimininius, whatever the hell their name is, but there were just these adorable small little dinosaurs, like shoebox sized dinosaurs that could fly. They sort of evoked not a bat-like feeling, but they were because they did have sort of snappy mouths. They were just adorable, and I thought, wow, if I was going to have a dinosaur, that would be my pet dinosaur. Easy enough to pop in a purse, but big enough and scary enough to keep people away. So it's like having a chihuahua that can fly.
Let's see. Here's a couple different names. Maybe the Microraptor.
Oh,
the Pterodactylus or Dimorphodon.
I think it was a Pterodactylus. It could have been.
Okay.
That sounds right. Yeah. It was just a cute pocket-sized little flying dinosaur.
Okay. Fair enough. I'll have to do some more research on that because I don't think I was aware of that one. But all right. All right, Claudia. Thank you so much for being on the thank you for being on the FSF podcast today. Where can our listeners and watchers, viewers go to find out more about you, your work, and things you have coming up?
They can go to my Instagram page, which is official Claudia Christian. If they want to know what I've been in, they can go to IMDb, which is the International Movie Database, and they just pop my name in there. And they can get every single credit I've ever been in. So if they're playing a video game and they go, I wonder if that's Claudia, they can find out. Let's see where else they can find. Wikipedia has a fairly up-to-date page on me. And I only run one of my social media pages, and that's my Instagram page, official Claudia Christian. The other pages are either shut down or run by people trying to sell my books. So enough. the real me, the authentic me is official Claudia Christian on Instagram.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure to include a link for your Instagram page, your IMDb page, and I'll also put a link in for in case anybody's in need. I want to make sure there's a link for Option Saves Lives. We'll put a link to that website in there for people because I think that's very important to include as well.
Thank you. Please do that. And if anybody wants to watch my documentary for free, it's on YouTube, One Little Pill.
Oh, that's right. I'll put a link for that in there down as well. And that'll all be down in the show notes. So that way people can get that information. And especially if it's something like that where it might be able to help them, we want to make sure we do that as well.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Now, hey guys, if you haven't already, this seems like a really good time since I got you here and you've been listening to Claudia and me ramble on for a little bit, to remind you that following our show on YouTube is the most important free thing that you can do today. It helps ensure that we get more amazing guests like Claudia Christian here, and have these great moments for you guys to be able to listen to and find out more about your favorite people in pop culture. So please consider following our show. It helps us out way more than you know. And be sure to check out Claudia's work as well, and consider donating to her organization as well. And let's keep that going, and keep her going in this work. To use the expression, she's doing the Lord's work. She really is. So let's help her help people. So on behalf of Claudia Christian and myself, I'm Tim, host of the FSF Podcast. Thank you for watching and or listening. And may the force continue to be with you as you live long and prosper. Goodbye.
Copyright 2026 FSF Podcast. Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Podcast. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpodcast.com.